guys, my name is Joe and I run Encounter Terrain. Today we are going to be pouring resin. There's a few different sorts of resin, there's a few different things that you need to know. Before pouring resin, I will cover a lot of the basics at the moment, right? Resin pouring 101, so that anyone, if you haven't done resin before, this will show you a basic guideline of how to make it work for you. If you have done resin before and you're having a few issues, feel free to watch this. It may correct some of your issues, it may not. Again, this is just going to be basic. There are three main sorts of resin that you're going to be able to get as standard pretty much everywhere, online, shops, this sort of thing. The most common that you are most likely going to see is epoxy resin, aka bi-component epoxy adhesive. In other words, glue. This glue is a two-part epoxy resin glue. It says so right there on the top. Super cheap, super simple. Take the same amount of part A, the same amount of part B, mix them together. You can add your different colored inks into them if you want, and then it goes rock hard in about 5-10 minutes, depending on how much you're using and how hot and humid where you are is. This stuff is fantastic if you're doing small pieces. Here is one that I did yesterday. In there, nice little simple piece of foam. And you can see the resin has dried in there. Now, epoxy resin, because it dries so quickly, if you don't mind having bubbles and things, like I didn't mind it in this because I want this to look a bit festery. Now, this is rock hard, but the thing that you need to know about epoxy resin is it goes hard very quickly because of the chemical reaction. That chemical reaction gets very, very hot. But basically, it's just a two-part, you mix it together, you pour it in, it gets incredibly hot while it sets, and then 15 minutes later it's this, essentially. If you want to use that, awesome. Just please bear in mind, if your piece is made out of XPS foam or polystyrene or any of the polystyrene extruded varieties, this resin will melt your foam. Do a test first on something else that you don't mind if it's going to melt, just to double check if it is going to melt. The next resin that I wanted to talk about is polyester resin. It looks like this. This here is the part B. So part A, part B, this is the resin, this is the catalyst. Catalyst is essentially a fancy word for liquid that makes other liquid go hard. This stuff I buy on eBay. If you want to use the same one as me, that's what I am using. This stuff takes colored inks really well. Now, in the instructions it tells you how much of this is required for how much of this. It's usually anywhere between 1 and 3%. You know what, it actually says it right there. It says it right there on the front. This is great stuff. This, although, will take anywhere between 24 hours to 48 hours to set, depending on how much you are using. One of the things that people usually don't realize is the more resin you are using, the faster it will set. So just to reiterate, the more you use, the faster it'll set. This is good stuff. I've used this quite a bit. The third and final sort of resin that I will cover at the moment is called polyurethane resin. Not to be mistaken with polyester resin. Polyurethane resin is similar to the epoxy resin where you have to mix 50% and 50%. So it's really easy to get it right. There is my 50% of part B. There is my 50% of part A. Now, I haven't used this exact brand before, but we'll see. Let's mix and pour some resin. Just before I mix and pour the resin, one final thing. In the riverbed video, I say before I pour resin, I like to seal my riverbed first. People seal it with all different sorts of things. Some people say you don't need to seal it. If you don't want to seal it, don't seal it. I do every time. I do just with this. This is PVA mixed with water, just to make it drippy and spreadable. I put it on just with a cheap paintbrush, and once it's dried, it just goes rock hard. And it just stops all of your loose riverbed material from falling off or floating to the top. And it usually covers, if there's any gaps and bits and pieces where bubbles are going to form, that sort of thing, it usually just sort of fills them in and then dries hard. So let's pour some resin. Okay, let's pour some resin. I'm here with my mate Dave. Dave is going to be helping me film from another angle so I can have multiple angles. I am basically going to be pouring this river using clear cast. This is going to be, it's just clear casting resin. It is a polyester resin. This is the polyester resin variety that we went through before. I'm basically just going to pour half and half into each cup, and then we'll see if we can get the colour right. This is going to be a fairly shallow river by the looks of things. Okay, now as you can see, there's quite a few bubbles forming in there, but they are going to rise to the top. What's important when mixing this is to use wooden sticks, rounded bottom. This is the catalyst. I wasn't exactly sure how much was left, so I've just marked it up half. So I'm basically just going to pour it in, and we'll see how we go. But I do want to get some gloves first. Polyester resin smells a bit, so make sure that you do this somewhere well ventilated. Alright, let's see. That was exactly right. Wow. Now I'm going to do these one at a time, and we're going to go red. When the catalyst goes in, it just sort of sits in there like a bit of a clump. So now the key when mixing this is to do it slowly. Obviously not too slowly, but most of the time when people are getting bubbles in your resin, it's because of the mixing process. You want to basically mix it, and it's going to start to go a little bit cloudy, as you can see. That's the catalyst mixing in. Now this particular resin takes about 20 minutes before it turns into a gel-like consistency. Now that gel is when it's going to stop being, you know, workable or mixable at all. You really want to stop using this after, I don't know, probably about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Then you want to start to be able to pour it. Okay, so now there are a few little bubbles in there, but they will hopefully come out with the pour. Let's put in our red. Now, red dye, or all of these dyes, and polyester resin, it goes a long way. So we'll start with 2 drops, and we'll see how that mixes up. Now, this river may end up being pink. I'm okay with that. It may just be a pink river, but so that's what 2 drops will get us. That's a lovely pink consistency. Oops. Let's put in a few more. I want to make this very red. Speed through with some thrash metal. Good. I think what I want to do is darken it a bit with some black. This is just black ink. 3 of those. I think I'm almost happy with that. I think I want maybe 1 or 2 more drops of black. What do you reckon, Dave?
Yeah, maybe a bit more black.
4 may be a bit too much, but this is going to be the bottom part of the first pour. So if it's a little bit darker, I'm okay with that. So I can just go a little bit lighter on top, and it'll make the river seem a little bit deeper than it actually is. Oh, there we go. That's starting to turn into a nice little magenta. I'm now going to mix up. Oh, it's already starting to go a little bit thick. Maybe I'm going to start to pour this in first, actually. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that. So it's starting to, I can feel it starting to, you can see it's starting to become less liquidy and more jelly. So I'm basically going to pour this in straight away before even mixing up my other one. Okay, let's do this. Now the aim is to pour from up high to begin with. The higher you pour, the thinner the resin is going to get as it's stream is really thin. There we go. So let's start up really high. I'm going to mix up the other batch now. There we are. So, in goes the rest of our catalyst.
That's looking a bit more red, but I think that's the sort of colour.
Yeah, this is a nice looking colour, this one. And this one has no bubbles whatsoever. You know, neither does the river. Yeah, that there is at its nice gel stage. I'm happy with that colour. Let's move this table out of the way, aka our practice river. And once again, the pour is going to start. Pretty happy with that. What do you reckon, Dave?
Yeah, it's looking pretty good.
Now this is the most important stage. The most important stage is this. Take a big piece of tape, cover your entire piece, and put something over the top so that nothing's going to fall into there once it's done. And that's about it. Now we wait 24 hours and come back and check. Okay, so it's been about 24 hours and it is pretty set. There's no bubbles. Little skeletons are all locked in place. There's a lovely little ripple on the water, which I love. In the next pour, I'm going to go a little bit of a deeper red, and we're going to bury this guy about halfway up. That's it. This is now ready to have a second pour, or if you like it at that stage, just to put on your water effects if you want to do it, or you can just leave it just like this.